I turned down $1 million. And no, this is not clickbait. But before you call me crazy, let me break it down for you. So I bought this 32-unit apartment complex back in April of 2020, and I paid $1.4 million for it. In December of 2021, I turned down an offer of $2.4 million. Let me break down all the steps of this process and how you can actually do the same thing too. So I actually found this deal by driving by the apartments and just calling the number on the sign. It was a mom and pop owner, and she had her cell phone number on the sign for the apartments. They said they weren't looking to sell, but I didn't give up. A few months later, I sent them a letter with an offer of $1 million for the apartment complex. I didn't hear anything, and I waited another 3 months, and then I sent another letter with an offer for $1.2 million for the apartment complex. But still, I never heard back anything. I waited another 3 months, and then I called the owners again. They said they got my letters, and they thought about it really hard at the $1.2 million offer, but they decided not to sell. But the fact that they told me that knew that they had motivation and they were willing and open to consider a sale. I told them, hey, maybe I could offer you more money, but I need to know more about the apartment complex, such as the income and the expenses that it costs to run the property. And they agreed to meet me at a Starbucks to talk some more about the property and a potential deal. We ended up meeting a few weeks later at the local Starbucks, and we negotiated on the spot and ended up with a verbal agreement for $1.4 million. So when I started crunching in on the numbers, I found out that the average rent at the apartment complex was $685. And then I realized at a $1.4 million purchase price over 32 units, that would put the purchase price at $43,750 per unit. Now, that means the price per unit was more than 1.5% of the rent. What that means is you take the rent amount and divide it by 1%. That's the general rule of thumb of the price you want to pay for a property that's a rental property. This one exceeded that by being over 1.5% of the rent price. So the 1% rule is very common in real estate. For example, if a property rents for $1,000 a month, the most you want to pay for it is $100,000. Obviously, that gets harder and harder, especially in the coastal markets. So I knew I had a deal here when I took the 1% rule, where each unit was averaging $685. Divide that by 1%, I should be paying $68,500 per unit. However, I was getting it under contract for $43,750 per unit, which made this a no-brainer deal if it didn't need any major repairs. Luckily, the property didn't need any major repairs. It was already stabilized and cash flowing. It just had some cosmetic updates that could be used to make it look more modern and get higher rents. These are some pictures of the classic units that was how the apartment looked when I first bought the property. And then these are some pictures of a renovated unit that I spent money on to renovate to make it look nicer. When I bought the property, a 1-bedroom was going for about $650 a month and a 2-bedroom was going for $750. This also included water for the tenants. Now, after improving the properties, the 1-bedroom goes for $750 a month and the 2-bedrooms go from anywhere from $850 to $950 a month. A basic renovation that's cosmetic to the unit runs about $3,000 to $4,000. So how I purchased this property was with a loan from Freddie Mac for 75% of the purchase price. I found 2 partners and we created a joint venture, and we came up with a 25% down payment. I met these 2 other investors from real estate networking events, which is the power of networking and getting to know other people in your space. Now, the key here is one of these partners had Freddie Mac experience. What that means is they've signed as a guarantor on a Freddie Mac multifamily loan before. And that's one of the requirements to even get a Freddie Mac loan, is one of the sponsors has to have Freddie Mac experience. We decided to collectively bring $500,000 to the table to cover the down payment, closing costs, and some money for renovations. Since I found the deal, I only brought $100,000 to the table, while the other 2 partners brought in $200,000 each, but we split the ownership equally, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Essentially, that was my reward for finding the deal. So I actually went under contract with the sellers in December of 2020, and we were set to close the last week of March in 2021, but that's when the pandemic hit and Freddie Mac paused all their lending. It was a tough conversation having to call the sellers and tell them, hey, we actually can't close next week because our lender stopped lending. Luckily, the sellers were understanding and it didn't make a big issue out of it. A few weeks later, we finally got the green light to close from Freddie Mac, but now they had a new COVID protocol where they required an extra $60,000 of money upfront to be escrowed as a security deposit, essentially. This was called the COVID reserves, and this was to cover any mortgage payments in case tenants stopped paying. Once we closed on the property, we immediately began to make repairs and renovations to the apartment complex. First, we fixed some concrete patches in the parking lot and driveways, and we added LED lights around the exterior so it'll be safer at night. Over the next couple years, we would slowly renovate units as tenants move out, so we can increase the rents and have a nicer place to live for the tenants. By November of 2021, about a year and a half later, we were able to increase the rents from $21,375 a month to $24,815 a month, or about a 16% increase. I marketed the property on Facebook just to see if there was any interested buyers, just to see how the market was, because the market was very hot at the time. I ended up getting a buyer that offered $2.4 million for the property. That's $1 million more than what I paid for it in just a year and a half. I was very tempted to take the offer, and I spoke to the partners about it, but we decided to keep the property and continue cash flowing as it was doing pretty well. Also, on our loan with Freddie Mac, we have a fixed interest rate of 3.84% for the next 10 years. So we could always cash flow, and we have a low interest rate that's not going to fluctuate. And the good thing we held, because right now in today's market, the interest rates are crazy high, but we're still set at 3.84%. At the end of the day, there was no wrong decision. Cashing out and making $1 million would have been great, but also having continuous cash flow and letting the mortgage get paid down by the tenants and building long-term wealth is also another great strategy. That's the beauty and power of real estate, is that you have multiple options on how to build your wealth. So to recap, I found this deal by just driving by the apartment complex, and then I cold called and sent mail to the sellers until they finally decided they were ready to sell. This shows that for larger apartment complexes and commercial real estate in general, the sellers need more time to be ready to sell. It's not like single family real estate where they're ready to sell in a week or so. You need multiple months and sometimes years to nurture and build a relationship with these sellers and really find out when they're really willing to sell. And all the money you make comes down to the price you pay for it. You make your money on the buy. So you want to make sure that you're getting it at a discount and getting a good deal. If you want to also buy these kind of apartment complexes, I highly recommend driving for dollars. Drive by and look for more rundown apartments in good areas of town where you can really renovate them and get good rents. And then reach out to the owners to start negotiating. Learn and educate yourself on how to run numbers, how to read a P&L statement, how to calculate your NOI and your cap rates. And all this is going to take time, but the more you repeat the process, the more you reach out to sellers, the more you underwrite these deals, the better you will get at it and the more confident you will become. And soon, you'll be able to purchase one of these properties. And like I said, don't worry if you don't have the money. You can always find business partners that have the funds that can bring it to the table if you find a good deal. Let me know in the comments if you think I should have sold it and taken that $1 million, or if I made the right choice in keeping it to cash flow. If you like this type of content, subscribe to the channel for more real estate tips and personal finance and travel hacking.